Okay, I counted to 8. How? Oh, you want me to? I'm not doing this with you today, Bill. Good afternoon. Today is Monday, November the 25th. We are preparing for our Growth and Economic Strength Committee meeting. On today's agenda, we have approval of the minutes, a sustainability update, and orphan roads update, and a living wage certificate program update. Okay, sounds good.
All right, thank you very much and welcome everyone. This is the November 25th, 2024 meeting of the Growth and Economic Strength Committee. We have three really good items on our agenda today, but first we need to approve the minutes of our last meeting, our September 3rd, 2024 committee meeting. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
And is there a second? Vice Chair Evans, are you available? I'll be glad to second the motion.
Okay, there you go.
All in favor of approving the minutes of the September 3rd, 2024 committee meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, the ayes have it. Let's go ahead and move to the first substantive item on our agenda, which is a sustainability update. We've got a number of great folks from our General Services Administration, Facilities Design and Construction, Robert Hinson, who's the chair of our Energy Advisory Commission, and as well as one of our deputy county managers, Emily Lucas. So without further ado, we'll turn it over to y'all.
Thank you very much. I think I'm trying to get our last member, Robert Hinson, having trouble with his sound, so hopefully he'll be able to restart his Teams and get sound working for him. But hello, commissioners. I'm Kevin Witchker, Senior Energy Engineer with Wake County General Services. We spoke last year, giving an update on the 100% clean energy goal and our progress and some other initiatives. And we're here, if you could go to the next slide, take a look at our agenda for today. We're going to review our key takeaways from last year's presentation so we can see where we left off. I'm going to go into a review of our building and fleet project and the progress, highlight a few new construction projects which showcase some implementation of energy efficiency and renewables. And then finally, we're going to touch on some of the things we've been doing with our partners around energy. So we can go to the next slide. So last year, we reviewed some of our projects and progress towards our goal. At that time, we showed a 10.2% progress towards the goal with the existing technologies that were in the resolution at that time. We acknowledged that there's a gap there. We proposed some additional items to help close that gap, including some new and emerging technologies and future technologies that we could include, such as heat pumps for one, especially commercial heat pumps. So almost half of our building inventory is fueled from natural gas, which is difficult to offset with clean energy. So converting to heat pumps powered from electricity will help us to meet the goal. The second item, implementing EVs where we can, building out our infrastructure so we can plan for the technology to be commercially available and implemented even for some emergency vehicles kind of in the out years of the plan. We also proposed changes to the clean energy resolution to include additional technologies. And finally, we reviewed some of our previous actions with our partners at the school systems at Wake Tech. Wake Tech has been doing a few presentations for us about some of the things that they've been up to. We've shared our lessons learned about solar and energy conservation projects with the school systems. And that's what we shared last year. So if you can go to the next slide. Since our last meeting, we've submitted a proposed change to the 100% clean energy resolution that was adopted in January this year. It didn't change the goal. It's still 100% clean energy by 2050 with an intermediate goal of 80% clean energy by 2035. The most important changes were we added additional technologies to our definition of clean energy. Most most notably and important here, nuclear, and this waste to energy also has a high potential depending on the future of the solid waste in the county. The goal has also been a part of the county strategic plan. So within goal 5 of the growth, land use, and environment, we have this intermediate goal listed, the 80% goal. And we're in the process now of identifying specific initiatives within that goal. Next slide. Just as a reminder, this is a roadmap to clean energy, which shows how we're going to get there. Energy efficiency and electrification, as well as renewables that are on our sites. They reduce our energy consumption, so we're looking at the downward from left to right. All those help us reduce our energy. And then utility generation and a clean energy purchase or an offset help us meet our goal, and that shows an upward from left to right, meeting at our goal there in the middle. This was updated last year. We've reduced our plans for offsets down to the 17% number that is seen there by assuming a wide-scale adoption and commercial availability of heat pumps, as well as wide-scale adoption of EVs industry-wide, and also including those additional technologies in our updated resolution. Next slide, please. Great. So I'm going to walk through some building strategies here in our next few slides. Just a quick reminder here, when we look at implementing our strategies, we prioritize energy efficiency first, then we add renewables, fleet electrification with clean and renewable energy, and finally we do what we can, and then we go after clean energy purchase and offset. So that's how we looked at prioritizing these things. In our next slide, we have a table which we've shown before. It shows our strategies that we continue to plan and implement. We've recently added heat pumps and electrification under energy efficiency. We've also added geothermal under renewables. The rest of those strategies kind of remain in our plan, and those are the updates this year. So moving to our next slide, we can go over some of our energy efficiency projects that we've completed recently or that are actively in construction. First off, this is a public safety center in the secure areas, floors 5 through 9. We did a VAV project, which is a life cycle replacement mechanical project. We were able to retrofit an older style dual duct mechanical system to a more standard single duct VAV, as well as incorporate HVAC control upgrade to that. Touched about 80,000 square feet of the building, estimated reducing the mechanical energy by 15 to 20%. We really like it when we can take a life cycle replacement and have a big impact on energy efficiency. Along with this project, we completed a LED retrofit of those same areas, which is estimated to reduce the lighting energy by 50%. That equates to about $34,000 of annual operating savings and a 10-year payback. Next slide. Some more energy efficiency projects. Another life cycle replacement at Eva Perry, where we were also able to include an upgrade of the HVAC controls. We retrofitted controls at Marbles IMAX. We are underway now with controls projects at Justice Center, Detention Center, and Northern Regional Center. And if you go to the next slide, this shows some results of the controls projects. So controls is a little, it's a vague and mysterious word. We say it a lot, but here we can actually see the impact of what these do. So we have three projects that have kind of over over a year of experience and utility bills that can show the before and after effect of these controls projects. These show 26 to 46% energy reduction, and so very happy with that. Some of the specific things we do when we're doing these projects is we change the programming on the controllers to do things like static pressure reset, which is setting all the fans to their minimum optimal speed they need for conditioning, which saves energy. We do supply air temperature reset, which adjusts the temperatures to reduce simultaneous heating and cooling. That also saves energy. We're doing schedules, turning off equipment when possible, setting chillers and boilers to run only when they're needed, letting them turn off and rest when they can. But it all requires the controllers to talk to each other. So we often upgrade the controllers to newer hardware so they can communicate better, faster, and we can share the data and allow those programs to run. So it's involved, but it's impactful. And one of the reasons we're able to complete these controls projects is we actually have a facility systems engineer and an HVAC technician who were brought on somewhat recently. They've been able to concentrate on the controls, keep these projects moving. So we're really grateful to have that support and the energy team here at GSA. You can go to the next slide. So as previously mentioned, we're looking to determine how to implement heat pumps in our facilities so we can offset the natural gas, the heating energy. Medium and large scale commercial heat pumps are still more of an emerging technology. However, smaller scale heat pumps have been widespread for many years, plenty of options available. So those are the ones that we're starting to implement now. So recently we've replaced HVAC units at Willow Springs Fire. We replaced them with dual fuel heat pumps to reduce the gas load. At Cary EMS, we've got all electric heat pumps in the base design. We're actually putting a more advanced heat pump into our new Apex main EMS station, currently in construction. So as we start to implement these, especially kind of the newer variable speed units with lots of computers, we're just going to have to understand what the maintenance requirements are for them and hopefully continue their implementation. Next slide, please. Great. As for our renewables projects, we're continuing the installation of solar PV. I think we've got a good groove going on solar. Caddy Road Public Safety Center, Garner EMS were just completed, both with solar systems on them. Under construction, we have new public health, which we're going to cover more specifics on later here in the presentation. Beach Bluff in the final stages of construction. We're adding solar to a couple EMS stations. Eastern Regional Center just had a roof replacement, so we're in the process of adding solar to that building. We also have the main park at Yates Mill, which is AE friendly, that we've designed and bid that. We're going to add solar to that building as well. So many projects in the works, and the next slide actually shows our total progress of installed capacity. So starting in FY19, where we didn't have any solar projects there, but once we complete the projects that are in construction right now, not including public health, we'll be at over 800 kilowatts of installed capacity. What that looks like for what we have installed currently, in FY24, we've produced 720,000 kilowatt hours. That equates to around 1% of the building electrical consumption of our portfolio electric consumption. And then once the new public health building is online, that's a very large system. The county-owned solar capacity will be over 1.2 megawatts. So exciting, it's a very exciting result of that clean energy goal and support for these projects. The next slide this represents the impact that solar has at the building level. So all of these sites were existing. So we have the before and the after electrical consumption. So as we install these systems and design them, we try to put as much solar on the roof as we can, as is practical. And for these set of buildings, we see a 18 to 50% reduction in building energy. So you can see it depends on the energy use of the building to begin with, and then the amount of available roof area as to how much that we can offset. But still a good percentage for many of these. Next slide, please. So as for clean energy purchase and offsets, over the past year, we've investigated the procurement of renewable natural gas from the South Wake landfill. So at that site, there's a third party that operates an electric plant down there that produces and sells electricity. Solid Waste has a profit sharing agreement with them to help fund their operations. But that third party is converting that electric plant to a plant that produces renewable natural gas. So they take the landfill gas, remove moisture and contaminants, and improve it to a quality where they can inject it into the natural gas pipeline and sell it off-site. So the process has lots of steps in it. They have to remove like CO2 and oxygen and nitrogen if they need to, improve the quality of the heat in the gas. So it can be costly to do that. The facility is not in operation yet, but they are in the process of trying to identify customers for their gas. We've had some initial conversations with this third party. It seems like there's potential to purchase the gas, but it would be a long-term agreement and a significant increase to the county's utility budget. So while it's a great technical opportunity, we are hoping to find some lower cost opportunities. And then on the electric side, there's a new program called Green Source Advantage Choice. It's a program offered by Duke Energy where it provides the ability for large customers to procure electricity directly from a renewable energy producer. And we use Duke Energy's grid to get that electricity to you. So essentially we would enter into an agreement with a solar facility, they produce clean energy for us. We pay for that energy. We also pay Duke for their service and providing us the consistent, reliable electricity at our meter. There's some specifics of this new program we're trying to evaluate. Really, when it comes to the environmental attributes or the RECs that come along with that energy, there's some things that we need to understand. They don't track it the same way, so we are still evaluating that opportunity, as well as the renewable natural gas. Next slide, please. So in looking at our progress towards the goal, we consider the electricity that's clean, that's already being provided from the utilities. So looking at the utility generation mix is important for us to keep track of. Currently, a portion of our electricity is provided through clean sources. The update to our resolution does include some technologies like biomass, hydro, solar, nuclear, and Duke Energy actually provides us a report that's custom to Wake County that's shown here on the right, which shows us our percent whenever we ask for it, and we generally ask for it once a year. And this last report in 2024 showed that about 53.6% of the county's electricity is provided by clean resources. Just over half of our building portfolio is electricity, so this is great news. And as our electric grid becomes greener, it's even better news. The Carbon Plan and Integrated Resource Plan, the CPIRP, is a process that the utility has to go through now for their resource planning. And in 2024, they submitted a new filing to the Utilities Commission that showed 75% clean energy by 2038 and 100% by 2050 as mandated in House Bill 951. So potentially some good things on the horizon for us. We go to the next slide. This is a summary of some of our projects so far with LED, building controls, and solar. If you look at the cumulative savings, we're at close to $1 million since FY19 of savings. So to put that in perspective of what it's like on the overall portfolio, the next slide shows us energy consumption. Next slide, please. Thank you. Building portfolio. Yeah, here we go. So all the project efforts that we just discussed, energy efficiency, renewables, they can all be seen in our utility bills. And so this KPI that we use and we share with Energy Advisory Commission quite frequently is our energy use intensity. So that's electricity, natural gas, propane, all together per square foot. And since FY19, we've showed a 8.2% improvement in our portfolio. So that's all of our buildings since FY19, and that's roughly 5 million square feet of building inventory. It's a big ship. We've been able to get it going in the right direction, and that's something that I'm proud of. We'll speak to our overall progress towards the goal later in the presentation, but that's building portfolio wide. We're looking good. Next slide. Great. So I wanted to mention a couple things to help with project costs. So first, elective pay, which provides credit back for our projects. It's a relatively new program that was announced a couple of years ago as part of the Inflation Reduction Act. It took a while for them to come up with their guidelines and all their forms to submit to the IRS, and then a while longer for us to figure out how to do that. But we have submitted for the first time to try and take advantage of these credits. And what it means is roughly 30% in the form of a check that comes back to the county for clean energy projects and EV infrastructure, charging infrastructure, as well as the $7,500 for eligible electric vehicles. And then another point on funding, we submitted two projects under the community project funding with Representative Nickel and Representative Ross. We were given some initial positive feedback on the likelihood of receiving these funds, and we're hoping to hear back in the spring whether these are approved. Both of these projects were related to EV charging stations, which Alex Swim will cover in our next section on fleet. Next slide is fleet. Great. So to talk about fleet.
And if I can interject, I'm sorry, just to pause for a second. We've covered a lot of ground so far even, and I just wanted to see if commissioners had any questions or comments at this juncture.
Great.
And I'm looking for the little yellow hands, but I don't see any so far. So feel free to continue. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
Great. No worries. Thank you very much. I will turn it over now to the GSA Fleet Administrative Manager, Alex Swim.
Thank you, Kevin. You can go to the next slide, please. So energy efficiency, renewables, clean energy purchases, and utility generation mix, much like the building slide you guys saw previously, is a framework for how fleet operations is going about progressing towards clean energy. We are focused on managing the fleet sustainably, purchasing hybrid and electric vehicles, and building out charging infrastructure. Next slide, please. To aid in the transition to cleaner energy, we have created an Electric Vehicle Suitability Assessment, EVSA. We discussed this at the previous Growth and Economic Strength Committee, but to recap, the EVSA was initiated in 2022 and is reviewed annually. We developed criteria with the goal of choosing a vehicle that best fits the operational needs of the fleet. The 5 criteria listed to the right really fall into 2 main buckets, which are operational impact and procurement. We look at emission reductions, usage patterns, where and how many charging stations to place in a county location. And for procurement, we're looking at what type of vehicles available, if there's a premium cost to that vehicle, and all associated costs with upgrading or adding infrastructure. Next slide, please. Fleet electrification takes planning. We rely heavily on the EVSA for choosing which vehicles should be replaced and where to locate charging infrastructure. That second bullet point in EV charging stations is the Electric Vehicle Charger Infrastructure and Use Guidelines. This gives guidance on EV equipment infrastructure for both new and existing facilities. It includes EV parking space guidelines, which parking space allotment for county and public use, as well as setting standards for levels and types of charging stations. Our standard is level 2 charging stations. Next slide, please. We've added 10 electric vehicles to our fleet, bringing the total to 11 across 3 departments. We've also added 3 hybrid electric vehicles for a total of 21. These are not plug-in hybrids, and the reason we are choosing the hybrid electric vehicles are for their excellent mile per gallon metrics, and there are no additional infrastructure costs when putting these vehicles into service. This increases the energy efficiency of the fleet with greater mile per gallon metrics compared to traditional gasoline vehicles. Next slide, please. This year alone, we've upgraded and added more charging infrastructure for both county use and public use. 10 ports were brought online at new and existing facilities. For the public, we have upgraded the charging stations at East and West regional libraries. And if you notice, the gentleman smiling in the photo is Brian Wall. He is a county employee with Human Services Groundwater Systems. He and his vehicle are a prime example of how the EVSA works. Kevin mentioned earlier, but Garner, Maine EMS was opened earlier this year, and it included a level 2 charging station. Utilizing the EVSA, we uploaded the address of the new facility and ran a simulation to identify vehicles in the fleet that could potentially receive an EV replacement and park at that facility full time. We then reached out to the drivers and their departments to inquire about setting up a pilot to see if this was a good fit for their operation. As you can see, Brian is happy with the new EV and parking location, and this vehicle is now fully assigned to him to use on a daily basis. Next slide, please. To increase infrastructure in the county, fleet operations, with the help of Kevin and his team, have developed a CIP for charging stations and incremental EV cost. These are broken down over fiscal years, and locations were selected to give coverage throughout the county for fleet charging. There's also a planned pilot for solar canopy, along with dedicated charging station at Southern Regional Center. The dots on the map represent new facilities and existing facilities. Next slide, please. For public charging, we're planning on additions to libraries and park sites. This is an added amenity. We're currently determining the funding source right now. Next slide, please. So the last few slides have focused on the lighter duty vehicles in our fleet. We are interested in addressing heavier duty vehicles with idle mitigation technology. We piloted 6 ambulances with idle mitigation technology, which allows for the engine to shut off at idle. This will reduce fuel consumption and emissions. This is a new technology on the market, though, and throughout the pilot, we experienced impacted service delivery and vehicle downtime for the ambulances. The manufacturer is in the process of redesigning the system, but we are constantly looking at new technology to increase energy efficiency for all of our fleet vehicles. It's challenging, but we're not giving up, and we're open to new technology. Next slide, please. And to round out the fleet slides, I wanted to discuss our fleet growth. The county, according to wake.gov population trends, is one of the 5 fastest growing counties in the U.S., with 51 people per day moving to the county. To meet the needs of Wake County citizens, our fleet has grown by 20% since FY19. In FY19, we had about 1,000 vehicles, and we currently have around 1,250 vehicles now. Most of the expansion vehicles are for emergency services, specifically ambulances and law enforcement. These vehicles have a severe duty cycle and tend to idle for long periods of time. This has shown in the data with a decrease in energy efficiency and keeping up with the growing population in the county. Thank you for your time. I will turn the presentation back over to Kevin to discuss overall county progress.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. So last year we presented our progress, and it was at 10.2%. Since then, we've updated the resolution, added these additional technologies, and incorporating both building and fleet. We are at 20.4% towards our goal. So I'll say while our ECM program for buildings is more mature, we've made some really good progress on buildings, as previously mentioned. 8.2% improvement in our building portfolio efficiency. However, our overall progress is relatively flat. And as Alex mentioned before, the large driver for this progress is the growing needs of the county and emergency vehicles. So with the tremendous growth in fleet that really aren't normal passenger vehicles, it does create downward pressure on the fleet portfolio efficiency. And so that's the reason it's relatively flat here. It's also the reason that we're going to keep trying to address efficiency when it comes to emergency vehicles. Like Alex mentioned, we're going to keep trying to make that idle mitigation system a success for ambulances. So moving forward on this presentation, I'd like to showcase some of the successes in our buildings. So I'd like to turn it over to Tim Ashby with Facilities Design and Construction.
Good afternoon, commissioners and fellow attendees. In the past couple of decades, much of building design is focused on energy efficiency. However, in recent years, we've seen a pivot to more holistic practices for design of new facilities and even renovated facilities. That includes not only energy efficiency, but sustainability, climate resilient design, decarbonization, among others. Today, we're going to focus on a couple of projects that are in construction and will be finished in 25 or 2025. The first is a public health building. And here you see the site of that campus, which is adjacent to Swinburne. And as Kevin already mentioned, it or referred to, this has the largest single solar PV system for the county. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit more detail as we go through this presentation. We also incorporated EV charging infrastructure we have 6 chargers in the parking deck, 8 in the general parking area, and infrastructure to add additional EV chargers as the need may arise. You'll also note that we have drought-tolerant landscaping, which will reduce the amount of usage on the site. And when you look at this site, you'll see several things. The public health building is the upper right-hand corner. The Swinburne building is the lower left-hand corner. When we looked at the orientation of the site and the design of these facilities, we wanted to accomplish several things. We wanted to reduce the heat island effect. Anytime we have buildings and parking lots and hard surfaces, we have heat island issues. Here we created more of a campus, almost putting the facility in a park-like setting. Now, one of the problems we have here, however, was the challenge that the facilities, Swinburne and Public Health Building, actually needed to face each other. Well, that put the main entrance of the Public Health Building on the south side or facing south. Well, that obviously is not premium, not what we normally would want to do, but it became essential in this case. So if we go to the next slide, we'll see what was done to compensate for that orientation of the building. First, the type of glazing or glass that's used is a low E high performance Fritic glazing, which has a sustainable and solar resistance feature to it. You'll also note that there are horizontal solar shades that extend out from the building above the window, above the glazing above the windows, and also very deep oversized canopies that extend out beyond the building on the south side as well. Now, what this accomplished here is it limits the solar heat gain in the summer, but it allows us to have more solar heat gain in the winter when you want that heat gain. Due to the angle of the sun between the summer and the winter. So if we go to the next slide, we'll actually look at a little bit more detail of the solar PV system. And there's some numbers here. There's really 2 I want to highlight. The projected EUI, which is the energy use intensity of the building. An average office building in the United States has a EUI of 90. You see the projected EUI of this facility is 43.8, less than half of what the average office building in the nation would have. That is a huge achievement. And of course, this is projected, so we'll have to see what the reality is once the building opens. The solar offset from an energy and demand standpoint was up to 40%, and that's because we have a lot of solar on this facility. We not only use the roof of the building for solar, but if you notice the detail in the lower left-hand corner here, you see a canopy was built over the top level of the parking deck in order to create and utilize solar on that deck. In fact, the panels are starting to be installed this week. And I'll actually be going over to check that out later in the week. This is a much more sustainable design than taking these panels and putting them on the ground somewhere where we basically take away sustainability by creating or taking away forests or shrubs or sustainable features. And by putting it here, we already have that hard surface where we're working with. Plus, it creates a little bit of shading for the vehicles underneath as well. So there's a true benefit of this. Now, it also costs a little more. And the reason it's a little more costly is the structure that needs to be put into place, not only as far as the canopy is concerned, but also the structural support throughout the parking deck itself. The second project we'd like to look at would be Beach Bluff, which is the next slide. And it's an outstanding project which provides a park in an area of the county where there is few or little places of this nature available to the residents. Now, this particular project preserves farmland or open space that's very valuable, obviously, here in Wake County. And a number of things were done here to really make this not only a sustainable site, but also an energy efficient site, including the park itself and the way it was designed. It was designed so as to limit the disturbance of the park or the land. So we left intact the majority of the forest that was already there, and then created little intrusions into the forest, such as canopy walks, playgrounds, and things of that nature. Permeable pavers are used quite extensively in the park. That, of course, limits stormwater wash-off and contributes to keeping a pervious surface, a more pervious surface than you would have if you had paving or concrete. And of course, we use solar energy at this site, geothermal energy, rainwater harvesting, and things of that nature. And so if we go to the next slide, we might note that we can see that this will be the first use of geothermal wells in the county. Let's go to the next slide. And this will be valuable to us from a number of standpoints, because we'll see just how well it performs. And we'll also see if there are any real challenges to maintaining that system. So this, we might say, is a test case for us, but it was an excellent location with all of the land that's available to drill the wells that were needed for geothermal. You'll also see, even though these are very small buildings, very different from the public health building, you see the same utilization of the overhangs. The 8-foot, in this case, 8-foot overhangs that extend on the south elevations, reduce glass and glazing on those. And really important to us is the sustainable site certification. That is a rating system in which we are applying for the park. And of course, it's been ongoing through design and construction. And the final submission for that certification will be made in January. Soon after this park should be finished. We should have a ribbon cutting, I think, in the spring for the park. But interestingly, this certification is now being utilized in 41 states in the U.S., as well as 23 different countries. So this will be quite an achievement for us to get for this particular park. And with that, if there are any questions on these couple of projects, I'll turn it over to Kevin.
Any questions on the slides, on these slides or slides up to this point? Commissioner Mile. Commissioner Mile, you're on mute.
Not only on mute, I didn't have my video on, so I'm all.
Oh, there you go. Now we can hear and see you.
Oh, awesome. But I just had a couple of questions. You were talking about the level 2 on the charging stations. What are the different levels, if you will?
Yeah, so there's a couple different levels of when it comes to the charging stations. You have the original, you have a charger that comes with the car when you purchase it from the dealership. Mm-hmm. They consider that level 1. You can plug that into your regular 110 wall outlet. It will take quite a bit of time to fully charge your vehicle. There's standard, and most municipalities and organizations go with a level 2 charger, which gives you an increased charge time. So it's essentially a dual pedestal charging station with 2 ports, and you plug it in, and depending on how much juice it has, you can charge your vehicle pretty quickly, within a couple of hours. Certainly overnight with fleet, if we're thinking about setting up charging stations, they would park at after work, let it charge through the night, and be ready for the next morning. There's also a DC fast charger, which is quite a bit more expensive, and that one really that can charge your vehicle anywhere from a half hour to an hour, depending on your charge level and where you're trying to get. But there's three different levels. So you got your at home, you got your level 2, mainly for fleets and businesses, and then you've got your fast charger, which they're kind of putting down corridors and highways and for electric vehicles.
Okay, awesome. And then my next question is, I saw on the map there where you guys have already planned different locations around the county in terms of where you're going to be setting up these stations. So how many charging ports will there be at those individual stations?
Yeah, we're really
I can take.
Yep, yeah, you can go for it.
Sure, I can take this one. So, Commissioner Romano, we're actually planning for a phased approach for these with our fleet stations. So what we want to do is we want to go in and set up the infrastructure to build out 10 to 12 ports, but we'll probably end up installing 4 stations with the electrical infrastructure to build out 10 to 12. And that's at each regional center that we discussed, north, south, east, and then future west, and then kind of the middle of the county at the office park and a few other sites to hit the core of the county. So that's our plan, kind of a phased approach, so we don't overbuild. We can kind of grow our fleet inventory with our charging. We're not investing too heavily in either one of them. So that's the plan for our fleet. And then the sites that we have for public, we're planning on 4 charging stations at each one of those park or library sites. That's 4 parking spots, 4 ports for those particular facilities.
Okay. And my last question, with that being the case, what would be the cost saving factor there for us setting up those stations around the county versus using, I guess, gas vehicles versus using the electric vehicles? Is that going to be the cost of building one of those stations?
I think I lost connectivity there in the middle of your question. Let me see if I have it. Are you asking the cost difference in
Yes.
the electricity that we're purchasing versus fuel, or total operational
Yes.
savings?
Yes.
So we have yet to see what the total operational savings would be that we would experience with the county. We are trying to roll these out to help meet our goal. We think we're going to experience less maintenance, and the fueling costs will be less with electricity than with fuel, but the total cost for infrastructure and the premium on the vehicle, we don't know exactly where that will land. We're trying to, build it out incrementally so we can have that experience and know that, and know the data for ourselves.
Okay, awesome. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Stallings.
Yes, thank you so much. This is really a comprehensive presentation, and I really appreciate the details. I really appreciate how the breadth of the portfolio too, and I think that's just probably what we have to do when we're thinking about trying to achieve clean energy goals, but just really appreciate the thoughtfulness that you all have put into all of this work. A question about the idle mitigation with the emergency vehicles, is that just because of the technology? The technology is just not there yet to be able to mitigate that better with our emergency vehicles?
Yeah, so there's a couple of companies out there in this idle mitigation space. We created a pilot for both companies to come in and work on our vehicles and implement that system. What we're seeing was just, they were having issues with implementing the technology on our Chevrolet chassis platform. And they've gone back to the drawing board. They're redesigning it, utilizing different battery packs and stuff like that. And they are supposed to get us more information beginning of the new year and give us a path forward to make this system work in our ambulance fleet.
Good. Great, thank you. And then also, I really appreciate all the solar that we're trying to integrate on our new buildings, whether it be our EMS stations, the regional center, the park at Beach Bluff. Would we assume that we would be able to put solar on our libraries with our library bond now that it's passed? Do you have thoughts about that?
I would say that is something we definitely will be looking at. We're obviously very early in that process, but there would be opportunities for us to include solar as a possibility, and it would be something we certainly will be evaluating on a case-by-case basis, if not holistically.
Okay, thank you for that. And I really appreciate the idea of rooftop solar, because I know, as my colleagues will remember, when we were at the Legislative Goals Conference recently with our county commissioners, they were really concerned about the solar farms, and the impact of that on farm preservation. And so I didn't want to raise it because I knew there would be some angst maybe with the buildings that we have, the number of buildings that we have. But I was clearly thinking about that, of how important and appreciative I am of rooftop solar versus, trying to continue to impact our farms, and so but anyway, that was something that came up, at the county commissioner conference that we were just at. And then lastly, I really appreciate the parking canopy for the public health building. And I'm curious, are there other opportunities for parking canopies? Do you see that? Do you see any other opportunities for that as well?
I think we definitely would see opportunities for that. This is our first utilization of that feature here with the county and with our new buildings. And certainly as we develop new buildings and so forth, we could potentially look at that, even on existing parking structures, though that becomes a little bit more challenging, or parking lots, is something that could potentially be evaluated as we move towards the future here. But there are certainly some opportunities there.
And we do have one plan for Southern Regional Center with our EV charging station. We want to experience what it's like to put on a parking lot. So we have a canopy plan for that location.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we'll keep moving, and just a time check, we're almost an hour into our meeting. I know we've got another 2 topics that we've got to get through, so we'll do our best to be efficient, but I know you've got a lot of amazing work to share, so we'll turn it over to you.
We can go to the next slide here, and see. Was Robert Hinson, were you able to get your technology working for this meeting? No, he was having some issues with being able to hear the presentation. So I'll go ahead and cover these next few slides. Not as eloquently as Robert can, but I'll give it a go. So we did have a STEM career symposium this spring. This is
Kevin?
really a thing. Oh, Robert.
Are you there?
Yes. Hi,
okay,
Robert.
Good.
We can hear you.
Well, thank you. Yes, I am technologically challenged at some certain points in time, but I do want to step in and first of all say, as chair, I couldn't be prouder of the staff and what they do and how they go about doing their business. And I think one thing about them is they work with a lot of other municipalities, other county agencies, and just to highlight one thing that we did with that. We typically have at all of our meetings with some of our consultants, as well as with our partners, have learned that there's really a shortage now of electricians and HVAC experts and those kinds of things within our workforce. And we have problems getting those people on board and hiring them. Our partners do as well. And I have to give a great shout out to one of our Energy Advisory Commission members, Evan Jones. Evan is a teacher, a 5th grade teacher in Wake Forest. And in listening to all of this, he brainstormed with himself and came up with the idea, why don't we have a STEM career symposium utilizing the school system as well as Wake Tech to be able to have rising sophomores and juniors to come into a symposium where they would be able to see what might be available out there and opportunities they may not be aware of. So if you go to the next slide, Evan was able, with his partners with Wake Tech and with the school system, to identify over 40 industry partners. These are both from the private and public sector, and all of them were involved in putting on this symposium back in February of 23. And we had over 160 students representing 15 high schools in the county. A great success. And if you'll go to the next slide, Kevin, you can see that, the feedback was overwhelmingly positive. I listened to a lot of the sessions myself. It was all interactive. The kids were enjoying it. You can see it was fun. They loved being able to talk to people in the business. I think the other thing that some folks came away from, myself is included, is that these are really good paying jobs that can be filled at both our, with just some vocational training as well as some other additional educational opportunities. And having Wake Tech there as well as the school system, we're trying to do something as a county with the Energy Advisory Commission in getting some of these programs out there for people, especially the students. We are planning another symposium in March of next year involving Wake Tech and the school system. And I think that that's just one example of the partnerships that I think we need to have going forward to try to mitigate all of the energy issues that are out there, and go forward and work with each other to understand our strengths, understand our challenges, where we've gone and had good luck versus some other things, and how we might go forward. I think that's the key, and I hope that both Wake Tech and the school system feel the same way. Back to you, Kevin, unless anyone's got any questions on that.
Anyone? Okay.
Thank
you, Kevin. Thank you, Mr. Henson. Much appreciated.
I think we have one last slide in the presentation that Emily Lucas was wanting to cover.
Yeah, thank you, and good afternoon, commissioners. It's my first day back, y'all know that. So I still feel like I'm on a time change, but I'm happy to give some updates on the school system and their efforts towards energy conservation. As you know, neither them nor Wake Tech are part of our clean energy policy itself and our goals, but they do strive to work with us to do things that are both sustainable on their campuses from a facility standpoint, which is what our responsibility is, as well as how they incorporate sustainability into their programs. So I'm going to specifically give you an update on Wake County Public School System. The Board of Education did adopt policy 1810, which is their sustainability policy, on October 1st. It recognizes sustainability as a guiding principle in what they do. As I mentioned, this impacts not just their building program, which is one of the things that we mainly fund, but also how they incorporate sustainability into their curriculum and into their programs. As you can see on the screen, they have 4 tenets: to manage resources, conserve resources, reduce and eliminate waste, and then reuse and recycle materials. The way that their sort of policy structures work, they move from a policy structure and ask their respective departments to develop specific initiatives and strategies that align with these 4 tenets. So we have already been having conversations at the Joint Facilities Core Team in advance of their board adopting this, because we knew it was coming, and after their board adopted it, in thinking about how we as a Joint Facilities Core Team look to update their 7-year CIP to ensure that sustainability initiatives are incorporated into their new construction, as well as their renovation projects, with a focus on energy conservation. That hasn't been specific in the past. It's been a lot of the things that Tim Ashby shared with you about how we incorporate sustainability into our buildings. They do some of that already, minus the solar. So there'll be a focus on on solar as we look to update their CIP and how funds are allocated between new buildings and renovations. The school system also is working toward filling an
Whoop,
Did I lose Emily?
Emily's frozen up on my screen here.
Same.
Same.
About her mid-sentence there. Let's just wait a moment, see if she can pop back on, and then if not, Kevin, would you be able to cover the remainder? If not, that's okay.
I think Emily would be best to cover this
Okay.
slide. I think she was wrapping up there. So
Okay. She appears to have disappeared.
Maybe she went out and maybe she's coming back in.
Yeah, it's a sign of progress.
Hi, I'm Michael James for the next few minutes.
Okay.
Because somehow
Whatever
my
works.
computer has lost internet connectivity. I'm not sure the last thing that you heard, but if I'll start with the Wake County Public School System is looking to fill an energy auditor position that they've had vacant for some time. I think measuring and understanding where your energy consumption is and where you're seeing a lot of energy usage will help them work toward making some changes. As you saw from our presentation earlier, it's not just offsetting energy consumption, but it is about reducing your energy consumption. So the energy auditor position will help with that. The facilities core team has also talked about utilizing some funds so that they can have a sustainability coordinator position. While it's great that they incorporate some of the same features into their building design and construction, having somebody who can focus on sustainability initiatives after a building is constructed, or maybe that building isn't even scheduled for a major renovation for a number of years, but they can do some things in the meantime. Robert Henson, I don't know if you've mentioned this to everybody, but we did have a conversation with Durham Public Schools, and they do some things jointly with Durham County and the city of Durham to do some energy offsets. So if the school system has a position that's dedicated to sustainability, that might help coordinate some of these efforts a little bit better. But we are looking, as I mentioned, now that they've officially adopted this policy, both the Wake County Public School System staff and our facilities core team feel like we can work a little more diligently into incorporating energy conservation into building design and construction. And I'll stop there.
That's great. Before we open it up to questions from anyone who may have some, is that it for the presentation, Kevin and Emily?
it is. Yeah, that was the last slide.
Perfect.
Thank you all.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, any questions or additional comments from commissioners? Now I can see everyone. Commissioner Stallings.
Yes, I'll be brief with this. Mr. Henson, would you want to chime in and talk about the thoughts that you and Mr. Jensen had about solar and Apex, or would it be easier just to maybe talk offline with Emily about that?
I think Emily's well aware of Mr. Jensen and his efforts and I try to make sure that anything that Bill and I are talking about that she's aware of. Bill has been very instrumental on the Energy Advisory Commission in making sure that we are definitely looking at solar, incorporating solar where we can. He has a great interest in that. He was a former town council member in Apex and was involved in solar over there. And he actually took it upon himself to look at 5 or 6 Apex schools and had a reputable solar contractor look at those buildings. This contractor is one that the county has utilized as well. And there are opportunities, obviously, to put solar on those buildings. And I hope that that information is going to get back over to the school system. But obviously, it's like any of the projects that we have looked at. I think they just need to. We started out about 5 years ago, and we did one, and it was kind of a pilot situation. And you've heard about a number of other pilot projects with Beach Bluffs, with the geothermal down there, and with going in and trying to put solar on canopies and how that works. And I'm just encouraged that maybe with that information that Bill has shared, that perhaps there can be, on behalf of the school system, a pilot project that might work for them and be able to understand the benefits, the challenges, the cost savings, obviously the upfront costs, and just have a better understanding going forward. They represent a huge dollar amount, and just as Wake County does in energy. And we always preach that the energy, the cheapest and cleanest energy is the energy we don't use. And so how they might be able to incorporate energy efficiencies both on their existing buildings and older buildings, and Kevin and staff at Wake County have done a heck of a job in addressing those kinds of things over the last 4 or 5 years. They've been doing it all along, but I think to your credit and the commissioner's credit is that there's been this, a dedicated funding source that has allowed Kevin and the staff to work towards those things. And I think that's been critical. And we certainly appreciate it for the Energy Advisory Commission to continue to have those resources. So.
That's great.
Yep. Okay.
Any follow-ups on that, Commissioner Stallings?
No, I just appreciate Mr. Henson sharing that with the committee so that everyone could hear that information. Thank you.
Great. Any other thoughts or questions? Well, we really appreciate you all walking through all of this. It is so amazing to see the amount of progress that we've been making, having the data, of course, to back it up. But to see what you all have been able to do in these first 5 or so years of our 2050 goal is really just very encouraging. And I know we're hoping the technology is going to get better. So hopefully your job will get easier as we go forward, as time progresses. But it is really wonderful to see the forward motion and the progress that you all are making. So keep up the good work and keep us posted.
Very good. All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Okay. And with that, we're moving on to our second main agenda item for today, which relates to orphan roads. We have our very own Terry Nolan to walk us through that. Ms. Nolan, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. I am going to be giving you an update on some of the orphan road items, a discussion that we had a couple months ago. Brittany, if you could advance to the next slide, please. So back in March, I gave an overview of the county orphan road program, and just a quick reminder, orphan roads are roads that were originally built to public standards intended to be turned over to the state for state maintenance, but the developer, for whatever reason, did not complete the job and turn those roads over. We have about 150 miles of roadway, of orphan roads within Wake County alone. And so I talked a little bit about some of the challenges related to orphan roads. Most serious is the cost of projects, but also some emerging housing concerns that we're hearing about, and some of the legislation that has been proposed in the last few years that hasn't really gone anywhere, but is certainly needed. After that discussion, it was suggested that we try and talk to developers and see if there might be some way that we can help ease that transition, find out a little bit more about what some of the barriers might be to turning the roads over to DOT. And so we did that. Next slide, please. So our staff attended some conversations with home builders, and what we heard is that they really need consistency and reliability from the DOT. that is related to timely inspections of the roads when they ask for an inspection to see, if the roads are up to standard, as well as, there's a sort of revolving door of staff, and so they never know if one staff person is going to ask for this or that. So that can be a frustration for them. We were interested to hear that in conversations with legislators at the state, that they are okay with restoring county bonding authority, but, or if, they need timelines for adoption into the system. Now, Wake County used to use its bonding authority quite effectively before the state legislature took that authority away. And those were small-ish bonds. I mean, they were at $20,000, $30,000, and it was a carrot. So once the roads were turned over to DOT, then the county would return their money. Wake County does still hold some bonds for some communities, and we have effectively used that bond money for study of, the issue for some of these communities, as well as Preserve at Long Branch, which is under construction right now, has a bond, and those dollars are going to go towards the cost of construction. Next slide, please. So one of the things we did was, how can we better monitor those subdivisions that are close? Now, there have to be a certain number of homes on a road. There has to be an occupancy in the homes to a certain degree before the developer can even turn those roads over. So what we wanted to try and do is get a watch list going of, all right, some newish subdivisions, most of the homes are constructed. Let's start reaching out to these developers and try and see what we can do to push them to finish the job. And so this map shows a couple of data sets here. So the red is basically any road that does not have a road number. And then we are also combining that data with our tax administration data. So any of the parcels that are gray basically don't have a building on them. So this is data that is updated pretty much every day because it's the tax man. And so this is a very up-to-date data set that we can use to kind of monitor these developments. Next slide, please. So we sent a couple of letters back in July to developers that basically said, here's a reminder that it is your responsibility to turn those roads over to the state when it reaches that occupancy. And then also kind of saying, let us know if there's anything we can do to help. And we intend to send out letters probably every 6 months. So we'll send the next set of letters out in December. Didn't hear back from any of those 4, but we're trying. Next slide, please. Another thing that staff did is we continue to have these conversations with real estate professionals, including some of the attorneys that are working on some of these transactions. And so we heard more from them about what happens when it comes to when a home is for sale on an orphan road, that many times the sale will fall through because the buyer cannot get a mortgage financed. Now, they can sometimes shop around for a local lender, but a lot of these lenders are national, and all they really want is a piece of paper that checks a box. And what we heard from some of these attorneys is that some buyers are taking on liability that is very risky in order to purchase these homes. So we continue to have those conversations with the real estate professionals. Next slide, please. And just some other random things. We understand that comprehensive state legislation is needed to both address the enormous backlog across North Carolina of orphan roads, as well as prevent new ones. And there have been some bills that have been offered up to create some funding assistance, but understanding that the need far outweighs the ability to fund, it is likely that it would be some kind of uh, uh, assistance, but not 100%, and it would probably require some kind of local cost share, possibly, continuing with our Wake County Orphan Road program and having the property owners pay something, but any statewide funding could, lessen that burden to some extent. One of the other things that we are acknowledging is that the Wake County Orphan Road program is not always the best fit for communities. Our program is best suited for large subdivisions with complicated issues where it really is going to need a level of expertise to solve. But a lot of communities are just a couple of property owners, less than 10, and it's a short stretch of road. And contractors don't really want to deal with a government contract for such a small dollar amount. And so we're looking for more creative opportunities. And we've had conversations with some of these communities where the roads aren't in terrible condition, and it would just take a little bit of help, a little bit of technical assistance on the part of staff and staff time to kind of help them along so that the community itself can fund the construction and kind of do it themselves to bring those roads up to standard. And then the staff role here is just support and technical assistance throughout that process. We've also seen how much Wake County is a role model for other counties in North Carolina. Wake County staff helped Durham County set up a program very similar to ours. I don't know if they have a project underway yet, but they saw a need in their community and they reached out to us and we helped them set up their own program. We've also had a conversation with Iredell County and other community members from across the state. People find Wake County in their Google search when they're learning about orphan roads in their own community, and they reach out to us to ask, does this sort of thing, does my county, Nash County, Buncombe County, people asking if their county has this type of program. And so we've been able to do some outreach to Iredell County too, and talk to them about what it would be like for them to set up a program that is similar. Next slide, please. That might be it. Yes. So that's my update, just real quick. I'm happy to answer questions or discuss more.
This is just great. Thank you so much. And as a side note, I really appreciate the background slides that you included at the end of the presentation, including the fact that Wake County has up to 200 miles of orphan road. It gives us a real sense of the scale of the problem, especially since those orphan roads are often this long, so and affecting individual residential communities. But I see Commissioner Miles' hand.
And thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I just want to say thank you for bringing this to the board. Matter of fact, this was something that we discussed in our meeting, I think, last week there at the NCACC meeting. And of course, that was something that they indicate they will continue to talk about. Wasn't voted on favorably the way we thought it would, but I think it's important. I know, Vice Chair, it surprised us all. But we want to just say thank you so much for bringing this and continue the great work on this, because it definitely is a concern and an issue. I know I've gotten input from a lot of our citizens that have been affected by this, especially when they start looking at the cost that they would have to go back to spend in order to repair those roads. So thanks for your support and you continue keeping us in the loop on this. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, I think I saw Vice Chair Evans' hand next.
Yes, thank you, Terry. I just wanted to say that I appreciate you and the staff being sort of forward thinking and continuing to pursue other ways to perhaps mitigate this situation. I like the fact that you're reaching out to the developers and at least encouraging them to do what they need to do and making the county staff available to assist. And I also like the thing that you mentioned where, you're trying to think through how the county could be helpful with the much smaller subdivisions that need to do their own thing but could use some assistance. So I just want to say, I appreciate that we're trying to do the right thing for our residents, but this is a big issue. And, I too was disappointed that we couldn't get this through for one of the goals at the NCACC conference a week and a half ago. But I don't know. I think it was maybe some misunderstanding about some people from some smaller counties that maybe just didn't understand what this was all about. So I think we'll keep pushing for it. But I remember hearing some people say, they wouldn't be opposed to pushing the legislature to start requiring the bonds again. And I guess it's up to us. We need to start having those conversations, because that's really what got us into this situation where the developers don't have to take out the bonds until they get these roads completed. But anyway, appreciate the staff and how you're trying to think outside the box and continue to do the best we can here in Wake County, and appreciate you helping other counties as well.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair Evans. Commissioner Adamson.
Yes, Terry, thank you for this presentation. I had a resident contact me last year who purchased a house who had an orphan road lien on it, and apparently felt like she didn't know about the lien till she got her first tax bill in the mail. Is there any requirement that has to be disclosed? How would she have found it? So is there any requirement that has to be disclosed?
Yes. There is a standard form that all transactions have in which it is supposed to be disclosed the jurisdiction of the road, if it's who takes care of the road. Now, I have some thoughts on how to improve that particular form, but there's that. But then if this property had a lien, that should have been found pretty easily during just the regular due process. Now, there can be difficulty in that time between when the Board of Commissioners approves a project and when the project is completed and the Board of Commissioners approve the liens on those properties for the payback. That span can be, well, with the Preserve at Long Branch Farms project that we're continuing to work on, we have run into delays. And so that project has been kind of sitting out there for a couple of years since the board first approved that project. So there's that time period there in which it can be difficult for a new buyer to find out that information. But once a lien is placed on a property, there are red flags in our tax system. I mean, it should be found.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Adamson. Just a couple of questions for me. One, you mentioned recent legislative efforts in one of the slides in the background section, I think at the end. Those are all pending, nothing's passed yet, is that right?
That is correct. I think SB 635, if I'm remembering correctly, that one was probably the most comprehensive in nature. And it was Senator Vicky Sawyer. She represents Iredell County and Northern Mecklenburg County. And I had the pleasure of speaking with her as well as some Iredell County residents about their orphan roads a couple of months ago. And she really is the brains behind the comprehensive legislative efforts. She really gets it. And so she is encouraged that she'll be able to bring forward a similar bill, hopefully in the next session, to tackle this.
That's great. That's very helpful. And then the other question I had at the same NCACC meeting that Commissioner Mile was referring to, I had a one-off conversation with a commissioner from another county who was saying that I don't know if they thought it would be a good idea, but it seemed like they thought it was something that was a possibility or something that was allowed. that counties might be able to partner with homeowners associations and perhaps serve as a backstop or a bank or a guarantor or whatever it is, but that the homeowners association would be the entity that would then contract out for the repair and maintenance of the roads to get them up to DOT spec. And that was an interesting idea that really resonated when you were talking about how a lot of people don't want to work with the government because they don't want to get involved in government contracts and all the machinery that involves. So I was wondering if that's something that you've heard of that is desirable or undesirable or something else.
I think we would be open to that. I mean, we definitely want to partner in any way we can. The advantage of the HOA taking on the contract and paying the contractor is that they can get it done cheaper. If the road only requires a little bit of patching, they can just contract directly, and they don't have to go through the rigmarole of, we have to bid publicly and we have all these other requirements. And so, yeah, we would definitely be open to any kind of creative thinking in that regard.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So just for whatever it might be worth, if you think that's worth pursuing, obviously that's up to you. But it gets us out of being in the middle of it. But I think probably the value add that we provide is being able to guarantee that income stream to the HOA in a way that results in sort of a low interest loan. Obviously, it gets reimbursed from the residents, but yeah, so anything else on this topic? This is really helpful. And I have to say, it's really neat to see the evolution and the growth in our thinking on this. I mean, we're just light years ahead of where we were even just a few years ago. So I really appreciate you developing an area of expertise maybe you never thought you'd have. So thank you. Anything else on this topic? Okay, Ms. Nolan, thank you so very much. Okay, so that brings us to our last item slated for this meeting, which is an update on the living wage certification program. We have Mr. Michael James here to talk to us about it, I think.
Yes, good afternoon, Commissioner.
There he is. Ms. Lucas has no longer commandeered your computer, I take it.
That's right. Now, if things shut down and I have to go over to her suite, then that'll be something. Yeah, so brief update for you this afternoon on where we're at with development of the living wage certification program. We last were with this committee updating you all back in early September. We had just started work with our consultant that's helping us develop the program at that point in time. We've now been working with them for a few more months. So just want to share an update on where that's at today. Next slide, please. And so just as a reminder, the commissioners had directed staff to identify an organization that would both develop and operate this program, which included doing all the things that you see listed there. The RFP process that we did back in 2023 and early 2024 yielded a good consultant to help us design the program. We still need someone to operate this program. And so I just want you to keep that in mind as we go through the slides today. Next slide, please. So I'm going to recap some of the stakeholder outreach that our consultants have been doing, kind of like an environmental scan to see what's out there. They've also been talking to a lot of groups in our area that are interested in this work in one way or the other. So I'll recap what we've heard from them and then review some potential program models and some cost estimates. Those will be very preliminary, not making any recommendations to this committee today, but we are interested in your feedback and your reactions because as you'll see when we get to the timeline, we'll have to start making some decisions about how we structure this program, and your feedback will help us do that. So next slide, please. So I won't list off all the organizations, but I thought it was helpful for you to see them there on the left. So our consultant group and then county staff, as we've been able to participate in a lot of stakeholder interviews to start socializing this concept with a lot of the different stakeholder groups here. I'll just kind of, I guess, categorize how I see the groups and who we've reached out to so far. Education and workforce development focus groups, groups that represent the business community and small businesses, some think tank type organizations, some faith-based groups, anti-poverty groups, and also our consultants had a lot of conversations with the leaders of similar programs across the country. So I think it's a good group that's kind of informed the work that we've done so far and moving forward. Some of the takeaways that we've heard from all of these stakeholder groups is one, just to keep this program as simple as possible. There's a lot of concern that overcomplicating this will negatively impact participation and interest. And I think we talked about that a little bit last time when we were with you all in September. Certainly talked about building momentum with employers and how much of this program is really about marketing and supporting the employers that are already paying a living wage and building some momentum with them. So we definitely, that was reinforced with the conversations that we've been having. Pairing the program with workforce development resources was some interesting feedback that we heard. Some of the groups that work with different populations, different challenges, emphasize a need to, for some basic workforce training. They have folks that may be able to find a job or find a living wage job, but they don't necessarily, or are not necessarily always equipped with the skills to sustain that employment. So that could be something to help structure a program in a way that supports and sustains living wage employment and ultimately work towards upward mobility. Another thing that we've discovered, there have been some programs that are really kind of grassroots driven, volunteer based, and they've maybe had some early momentum and have kind of fallen off over time. So we just haven't seen a lot of success with programs that don't have any paid staff at all. So just wanted to flag that. And then finally, since the county at this point is involved in this program, one of the things that we kind of heard is, be careful about, creating perception of a regulatory program. As we've already discussed with you all, that's definitely not what we're intending to do. And this is really about recognizing, rewarding, and promoting the businesses that are paying living wages or are seeking to pay living wages. So that's certainly top of mind for us. Next slide. So I want to spend some time talking through this table here. These are some potential models just to give you an idea of kind of the scope and scale of options that we're looking at as we try to put some meat on the bones of this program. This is certainly very preliminary, nothing set in stone here, but it is helpful, I think, for you all to see kind of some ballpark numbers and program structure. So I've kind of organized these into three different models, and I think the big differences between these models really have to do with, one, how much you're promoting the program, marketing it, and then two, how much capacity you have to be spending with employers who are not yet paying a living wage, but may be interested in doing so and learning more about what that could involve and how doing that might help their business, because you're kind of getting into some sort of personalized consulting with businesses as you do that. So that requires more resources. So just kind of going from left to right, I've kind of labeled this first scenario as passive, and I don't mean that in a negative way, more just passive in that you have in this model kind of up to one staff person. So the work of the program is kind of split between, receiving applications, ensuring compliance, issuing the certifications, maintaining a website. And so you're splitting that with someone who can be out about in the community promoting the program. And in some cases, you may, struggle to find a person that kind of is has the right skill set for both of those things. And so the cost there, I would say up to $150,000, and that's really for staffing, but also for whatever it might cost to run the website, whatever marketing outreach you're doing, materials. And so that'll be the case through all of these across the board there for all the different models, just kind of inclusive of staffing and also all the operating costs. And we took a stab here projecting out certifications, one of the things that the consultant has helped us do is this right here. And they're looking at some of the models that are out there now. To give you an idea, Just Economics in Western North Carolina, which is one of the largest in the country, and their executive director has been helping us with our program. They have 4% of employers in Buncombe County. That's taken them years. To get there, but that's over 400. And so that was sort of a point of reference for us as we started to think about our program. So in this kind of first model, ballpark, we think, maybe up to 300. Again, these are very preliminary estimates, and that would be around 1% of county employers. In this case, as I kind of mentioned earlier, I think you would be primarily recognizing and promoting employers that are already paying a living wage, just because you have limited capacity to be out there encouraging and supporting other businesses that aren't quite there yet, as that's a more intensive workload, I think, with this program. And if you have less than a full-time person, one challenge you may have is just responsiveness. If you have, half-time person or something who's not working every day or not available all the time, you may have some challenges with responsiveness. Moving on to the kind of limited outreach model, here you start to have some capacity to do outreach and marketing. You can kind of split those duties up a little bit, and you may be able to staff in a way that kind of aligns different skill sets with those functions. And so as a ballpark, 150,000, 250,000 for that, and we think 300 to 1,000 employers. Another thing I should probably note here on cost, just for your consideration, and we'll talk about this more in a minute, but we've looked at a lot of models, and there could be opportunities for application fees as a revenue source to offset some of those costs. Certainly some of these organizations that do this work now get grants and donations. I think it's difficult for us to look at you all and guarantee or promise, that this program will be able to generate those revenues right away. And so we, potentially one model is some seed funding that sort of gets this program off the ground, and then over time may be able to, to generate more revenues depending on how it performs. So just wanted to point that out as we talk about costs. And so in this kind of middle model, you're able to do some of that outreach and engagement and support and split up those functions a little bit. And then the final model is just kind of, I would say, the most aggressive outreach, where you have more dedicated folks who do a lot of the marketing and spend more time with the businesses and more sort of customized and individualized support for them. And I think it gives you the most bandwidth to try and encourage organizations that are not quite there yet. Another thing as we think about revenues too, that I want to point out, there's sort of fee-based or membership-based models. So in this aggressive outreach model, you might have more capacity to sort of build out employer recognition programs or benefits packages that make it more attractive for people to participate, which could mean more revenues potentially. So, and again, on this one, potentially the most opportunity to start out with a lot of momentum if you've got sort of boots on the ground, different parts of the county promoting the program. You may be able to reach a lot of those folks that are already doing it now, sort of as initial momentum. I think in any of these models, you'd be trying to do that in the beginning, but you just have some more capacity. And I do want to emphasize too, when we talk about the staffing here, it's, this is not necessarily a person, but it's sort of a ballpark staffing level for you to get a sense of. It could be, embedded in another organization, but it's sort of like up to those levels, if that makes sense. So just wanted to walk through that to give you an idea and for you all to start thinking about potential funding levels as we look for someone to do this. Getting someone on board, I think we need some, sort of idea of what the county would be willing to commit to support the program. So just wanted to walk through that. Maybe it's, yep, okay, already there. Thank you. All right, so as we start to make decisions about the program, there's some things coming up that we'll be trying to solidify for recommendations for you all. And these are the things that I think it would be helpful for us to hear your feedback on as we do this. One, just on the wage standard. I think we talked about this last time, but the current rate for county employees is $21.78 an hour. It's about $45,000 a year on an annual basis. And that is after an adjustment that we do for our health insurance offerings. We would, unless we hear differently from you all, I think be very unlikely to recommend any standard that would be higher than what the county is doing. We think consistency is important there. Another piece of feedback that we've gotten is connecting this to housing, because a lot of times when you're looking, for example, to rent, you've got to demonstrate that your earnings are, 3 times a monthly rent, things like that. Our county employee rate is based on the cost of housing. That's how we develop it. And so we think that's a sound practice. And we've heard that from the stakeholder engagement that we've done so far. We talked a little bit last time about the potential for something lower as sort of a pledge rate with a goal of working towards a higher number. So that's something that we're considering. We talked just a minute ago about the fees. And so I think if, that's something we'd be interested in your feedback on, if you all have reservations about charging an application fee or some kind of membership fee to help generate revenue for the program. We kind of have heard mixed feedback on that. A lot of the programs do this. Some of the feedback we got was, employers are going to need to see how this program benefits them before they'd be willing to pay a fee to apply. So kind of mixed feedback on that. And then finally, as we think about bringing a long-term operator on board, I just want to share that, I think the direction that we understood from you all was find an external organization. Certainly still considering that, we'll say also considering internal options as well. Interest among potential providers is definitely part of that. As I mentioned earlier, we went through an RFP process last year, did not really find a viable partner for a long-term provider for the program at that time. I think a lot of work has been done since that may help with that, but we can't necessarily guarantee that we will find someone externally. Speed to implementation is definitely something that we're considering. We want to deliver this program, so we're looking at which model would get us there faster, as well as oversight. Looking at the different staffing models or the different program models that we looked at, you're likely going to have to support staffing either externally or internally in some capacity. And so figuring out what the best way is to do that, to make this program work, is something we're considering. Also, provider capacity and just their alignment with the other work that we do. Some of these programs also have other parts of their mission that are related, and they are able to to draw on some of the other work that they do. And then, of course, cost as well. So those are kind of the major considerations that we're sort of deliberating on now. And if you all have feedback or thoughts on those, that would be helpful. And then I'll wrap up with the timeline, and then we can, love to hear your feedback. So over the next few months, going to be doing some more employer and employee stakeholder engagement work, and that'll really be focused on testing some of the wage standard information, potential application processes with employers and employees to kind of get their feedback on what they think is realistic and workable. And then wrapping up the application process, selecting, what our preferred operator delivery model would be, and then really getting it ready to launch by May, which, to us means having the website ready, the outreach plan ready to go, and operations manual, which is one of the deliverables the consultant has for us. And then we'd like to select someone by that time as well. And then there will have to be a decision sort of through the budget process about the ongoing county funding to support the program. And so that's kind of where we're at right now and what we're looking add over the next several months. And with that, I'll turn it over to questions or just your comments and feedback.
Thank you very much, Michael. Thoughts or questions from the commissioners? While folks are thinking, I can provide a couple of thoughts. First of all, thank you for putting all this information together. It's obviously the product of a lot of thought and a lot of discussions on your part, so I'm very appreciative of that. A couple of things, just taking some of the topics that you teed up in no particular order. One is I tend to, at least for the near term, maybe down the road when it would be different when we've got an established organization going, but in the near term, I would tend to shy away from charging fees of the businesses. I just think that we're trying to encourage people to do the right thing. These are businesses that incurred additional costs to do that, and so charging them for us to be able to encourage businesses to be like them in that way, I think, I'm not saying we wouldn't get revenue. I'm not saying it. I know it's been successful or unsuccessful in other places, but my instinct would just be to maybe not do that in the near term. But I would be curious as to what, if any, federal grants or state grants or foundation grants might be available in one way or another. That seems like a potentially fruitful avenue, especially for startup funds. Just based on what I know of interests of various foundations. So that's one thing I would say. The second thing I would offer is I think the initial rollout is your best opportunity to be loud and to enroll a lot of businesses very quickly. So I would encourage us to be very careful and robust about the communications plan in May or whenever it is we launch this, because I think we're not going to have a lot of opportunities to get all the media outlets to cover it and everything, but that's going to be one of them. And I think that will do hopefully that will do some work for us. And so I want to make sure we do that right as well. Third, I think you're right to hear from businesses on testing what they think an attainable living wage standard would be for them. We may have very well-founded standards for our own employees, and know exactly how to mathematically correctly calculate these numbers. But if they're not doable to restaurants and clothiers and all other sorts of folks, it's not going to go well. So I would say that whatever the standard is, I think you've articulated a good starting point based on what we have determined for our own folks, but I think that we really have to test this against the kinds of employers that we would want to recruit, and so I would really encourage us to do that. And then, of course, we have to subdivide that based on regular county or regular employee compensation versus jobs involving tips. And I don't purport to know precisely how to do that, but I know enough to know that that's got to be considered as well, especially because a lot of the entities and businesses that are going to look to take advantage of this are restaurants, food service industry folks, et cetera. So I'd offer those items. And then the other thing is, I think that, so two things. One, I'm happy to find an external operator, but I'm also mindful of the fact that we've spent quite a lot of time trying to find an external operator. Obviously, I mean, to your point, the folks doing this work are going to need to live one place or another. I also think that, you're not going to get any more reliable, in theory, than having the county do this work as opposed to a, small or medium-sized nonprofit or that kind of thing. So my inclination, though I'm not married to it, would be to consider bringing this in-house at this point, just because, we've been barking up the same tree for a while and maybe haven't gotten the results that we wanted. If there's a reason to think that doing the same thing might result in different results, we can certainly, explore that. But at this point, that would be my inclination, is to bring it in-house. And then the last thing I'd say is that you offered sort of a 3 different options: the passive, limited approach, and aggressive approach options. To me, the guide star for this is using carrots to encourage businesses who might not otherwise be disposed to doing the right thing to do the right thing. And so I know that the passive approach really seems to say, it says it mostly promotes employers already paying a living wage. I think that's good, and that's certainly essential, but I like the fact that the other two options allow for some focus on employers not paying a living wage yet. To me, that's the bread and butter of the program, is trying to make a positive change, not just reward the businesses that we had at Hello. So I would err toward the limited outreach or the aggressive outreach approach, but those are just my thoughts. Other thoughts, questions? Any other feedback from Vice Chair Evans?
I'm trying to rumigate over my thoughts. The end result of all of this would be to get these employers who are paying what we think is a living wage certified, and they would put something in their place of business to show that. Is that the end result of what we're trying to do here? In other words, I know what we're trying to encourage, but you know, and I know we've been talking about this to some extent for several years, how we might, you know, acknowledge and encourage, but I don't know. I'm just not. It just seems like it's a delicate time. I think employers, for the most part, are paying as well as they can, given the labor market and what it demands and inflation and everything that we're dealing with. I just don't even know how I feel about the county spending a lot of money on this program right now, to tell you the truth. So I'm just sharing that. Thanks.
Thank you, Vice Chair Evans. Mr. Manager. Oh, we can't hear you, David. I'm sorry.
No,
there you
go. Thank you. I think I just lost my thought. So I know what it was. I'd like for us to initially, and we're not ready to talk about some other opportunities to staff this, but I think county employees would be next. I think adding county positions to do this, if there are other opportunities that can be just as effective, we should probably do that. And Michael and I had a conversation before, and we're not ready to kind of go into that model because we still need to have some conversations. But we will keep you posted on that.
Are you saying we're not ready to go into the model of bringing it in-house?
No, we're not ready to. We've had some preliminary discussions with an organization, but we haven't gotten a commitment. And so
okay.
Don't want to necessarily get into that. But I think the county employees would be our last resort, because our nonprofits tend to, they have a better way of having some of those conversations with businesses and selling it versus some of our county employees. So, and an example, yeah, so I think that's it.
Okay, so what I think I'm hearing, tell me if I'm doing violence to your thoughts here, but what I think I'm hearing is that maybe in terms of models, if and as we pursue this, you all want to be able to have the opportunity to chase down this potential nonprofit partner that you're talking to, and let's see where that goes before we make a final decision one way or another.
Definitely.
Okay, very helpful.
Thanks, Matt. Thank you for clarifying that.
Well, or muddling, I don't know which one I did, but other thoughts or questions? And I'm mindful that Chair Thomas let me know she unfortunately had to sign off for another obligation, but. You stumped all of us, Michael. So Michael, what do you need going further? going forward? Do you need further thoughts or a nod or not a nod from the county commissioners? Do you need further feedback? What can we do to get you what you need?
Yeah, thanks for asking. As I said at the beginning, we weren't really ready to make a recommendation to you today. Interested to hear your thoughts. Appreciate the feedback that you've already shared. I think we have work to do internally, as David referenced, before we could really bring you back our recommendation for how to bring this forward. I think what you've shared has been helpful, and we'll take that into consideration. And I think we were going to be plugging away at trying to put something together over the next few months, and I think we can get to work on that. I don't need anything official or any sort of decisions from any of you today. If you have feedback, if you want to kind of mull over some of this information, feel free to send us your thoughts over the next couple of weeks, and we can take that into consideration. If that works for you all.
Okay. Does that work with everyone? Does that not work for anyone? And I'm mindful of the vice chair's points as well. So it sounds like maybe we'll get a little bit more clarity on what this might look like, and then hopefully we'll be in a better position to make a decision one way or another. Is that fair, Vice Chair? Okay, sounds good. Okay, Michael, David, anything else on this topic or any other comments or questions from commissioners? Okay, very good. Well, I think that takes us to the end of our program today. Appreciate everybody's time. We've got a lot of really good things going on. Michael, thank you, and David and everyone, thank you very much. And I think with that, we stand adjourned. All right, thanks everyone.